So this is another Oracle card in my Sacred Symbology series that I wanted to show you. This was actually a card, I gave this out to my artistic friends instead of a Christmas card this year. The words on them were different for each person, but basically the rest of the card was the same. I made about 5 or 6 of them, and the wording was different on each one. You can see this one says the poet. You have a gift for the arts of a poet. This is authentic. And I love this last bit. This is authentic. It's like the universe is confirming what I thought with the rest. I actually made this for a friend who's an art journaler and a documenter, but I felt so connected to it that I couldn't bear to give it away. So I kept it and I had to make her another one, and I found phrases that worked perfectly for her for another card. And I think that's part of how you know when the symbols really connect with you, whether it's words or mark making, simple images like the pluses or more complex images like the deer. When you can't bear to give it away, when you feel connected to it, that's when you know that it's actually got meaning. You're just not making something that's pretty. And I struggled with that a little bit with the deers, because we're sort of going through a everybody loves deer phase at the moment, and part of that makes me just want to run away. But the deers have become, they're probably a newer symbol for me. And when I see them, I think of them as like angels hidden in plain sight. It's like the antlers of their wings. And it's like they're in disguise, even though they're in plain sight to us. And I love the idea of the wings being on display, but they're actually antlers. So, and if you've seen the movie Stand By Me, the bit where Geordie sees the deer in the morning and the other boys are still asleep, and then when they wake up, he doesn't want to tell them about it. He wants to keep it as like a quiet secret moment to himself. And I've seen that movie about 500 million times as well, so I think that's probably another connection that I have to it. So that's part of the reason why I use the deer. Deers are also like my favourite symbols at Christmas. They're the ones I choose the most. I've got, let me just reach over. I've got this ornament on my shrine at the moment, you know, and it's not that it's easy to buy deer imagery and stuff at Christmas, but I actually bought it because that's some symbology that I really like. It's easy to get at Christmas. So that's another deer symbol that I've got on my shrine, and that's sort of about angels watching over me, is why they're on there. They're there with oracle cards about Danielle Laporte truth bomb cards about angels. You can see here, just reaching over, angels, angels everywhere, and beckon angels. There, those 2 cards are on my creativity shrine at the moment. If you've seen my video about my shrine, and that shrine sort of changes on and off. I rotate that out. Probably every 3 to 4 months I change it up and recharge it and re-energize it by moving it around. So don't be afraid. Like, part of me, if a symbol's really popular commercially, it tends to make me want to run away. But then if it's something that really calls to you, don't deny it either. Rabbits are another one, which is great when it's Easter, because you can get lots of Easter bunny imagery and stuff at that time of year as well. Yeah, don't be afraid to. You don't have to commercialize the symbol, even though it's being commercialized externally. As long as there's a story and a narrative that connects to you, then don't be afraid to use it, and actually be quite courageous in using it, because it's surprising what comes through when you're willing to use things that you're very, very connected to. So don't deny yourself that opportunity because you're worried that it's commercial. Oh, there's a train going off in the background. You're worried that it's commercial, or that you think other people will look at it as commercial. Don't worry about what other people think. It's not for them, it's for you. Other people will look at this card and they will get a completely different meaning from it than you will. They will love it as much as you do, but the meaning that they get from it may be completely different to what you're getting from it. So Don't be swayed by what other people are thinking of a particular symbol, a particular color. If it's being commercialized to the daylights, let that go, let it wash away. Come back to your center, come back to your own truth. And if that symbol is true for you, then use it like nobody's business. Don't be scared, don't be afraid, be bold when you use it. Be willing to use it, be brave enough to use it. Because it's your truth, and you can't make cards or journal pages when you're holding things back because of external influences. So please, 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 please don't let that affect you in any way. I wanted to talk about the text. I get my text from the Reader's Digest condensed books. So if you're a bit funny about chopping up books, it's maybe not quite so bad when it's a condensed book in a collection in those Reader's Digest books. And I get mine from the Op Shop. If you're American, Op Shop's like a charity shop where you donate unwanted goods that they sell to raise money for charities. I think you guys call it Goodwill, maybe. So that's where I get mine. I think the book's like $2. How much Joanna fodder is there in a $2 book? Gajillions. And what I did when I made these cards, because I was making a few for friends, I wasn't just looking for a few phrases for one card that I was then going to finish and move on to a new project. I was making cards for 5 or 6 people, so I probably had 50 to 100 phrases laid out to the side of where I was working. And it's funny how I knew I was working on a card for a particular person, what words were jumping out that stood out as... When you're looking for words, it's easy to feel the connection for yourself, but to feel the connection to words that have meaning for a friend is another level of connection that's... You really need to feel it. And I think once you get the hang of doing it for yourself, it's easy to recognize words that might suit other people. And that's what made each card different. And when there's lots and lots of phrases, it's surprising how different things pop out to you and connect to you. And that was what happened with me, is that I made this for my friend, but then I connected to it so much that I couldn't give it away. And I wanted to show you, I need a pencil, hang on. Let me get pencils because I need to show you some things. Let me just flick this out of the way. Okay, so I'm going to just bring this up. You can see here these lines. I wanted to talk to you about these mark making things. So these lines that go up here. In the first video in this series, I talked about being a card maker. This black line around the edge is from when I was a card maker. That was like a technique that card makers used. By bordering your work, it pulls the eye into the middle of the artwork rather than letting it shoot off the page. And the lines that I've done on each side are like another version of a border, but they're a mark making border. But again, they're pulling your eye. It's almost like the artwork's, your mind's saying the artwork's only this sort of wide because of those border lines on the outside. But I wanted to talk to you about the physicality of mark making, because it's not just what the symbol looks like or what the mark looks like, it's the physicality of it. So when I make these lines that run down here, I don't get my pencil and just go whack, 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 whack. You could, and if you wanted to express frustration or anger or confusion, you may very well go ch-ch-ch-ch, and those lines would represent those feelings. But for me, when I made these, I ran up the page, lifted the pencil, came back to the bottom. Ran the line up, came off the page, went back down to the bottom, pencil on, up. And then the other option you do with that, obviously, start from the top and strip down. Take your pencil off, start again at the top, strip down, take your pencil off. Now those two movements feel completely physically different for me, and they make me feel a completely different way about the artwork based on which direction I do the lines. And people outside looking at it will never understand that physical feeling and connection that you have to your artwork. They cannot see that. All they can see is a line on a page that looks nice. But like I say, the artwork isn't for other people, it's for you. And that is it creates a deeper connection to your artwork that you kind of can't, like, you can't see it when you're doing it, but when you look at that card, you feel that physicality of connection. It's not just about story, like the deer with the story. It's not about symbols that represent certain feelings. It's in that moment, that physicality of drawing that line draws you in. And I wanted to show you this other one. I was talking about this text, but text can be mark making and a symbol as well. It doesn't have to be just this blatant obvious wording. And if you look up here, see this one that goes like through there? That's actually text that I wrote. And what happens is I write, I think there's a bit down here as well. It's probably not as clear. There you can see it's like pink there. When I write these sorts of things, 5 seconds after I've written it, I've forgotten the exact words that I've written, but I may remember the general idea about what it was about. And a week later when I look at this card, I don't remember what I wrote. But in the moment, I feel connected to the artwork, and it's like the words bring me into the artwork. It's like Alice being pulled through the looking glass. Do you know what I mean? That pull, and it's like you're falling into it. Or like, you know, Mary Poppins when they jump into the sidewalk art. It's that feeling of being pulled into your work, and that's another way of feeling connection, rather than just like this external, this symbol represents this thing. It's the physicality of being pulled into your artwork as well is another. So even though this is a symbol and a mark-making technique or idea, it's what it physically does to you with your artwork that is what really matters, not necessarily just what the image or the mark looks like. So that's something that was really important to me. And I tend to use that writing technique quite a lot, particularly if a background looks a bit like it's a bit missing something. I'll add that in. So it's not necessarily added in at the first sort of 1 or 2 layers. Often it can be right near the end as well. So, you know, the story that I write doesn't necessarily connect the artwork right at the beginning. Maybe it's what brings it all together at the end. I wanted to talk about the stars, just in case you haven't watched the first video. This little stars that I've got here are little punch outs. I could tell you probably 5 or 6 stories from my history, from my life, from different ages, you know, from when I was probably about 11, 15, 19, and even now when I take the dog outside, I go outside and look at the stars at night. I make wishes. I say the saying we say when we're little kids. And I think that's important, is that you have stories. It's not just, the whole point that I went on this journey was because I can't just make pretty things anymore. It was just, that was the only idea I had in my head when I started. I couldn't just make pretty things. I needed things to have meaning. I needed them to matter. And I mean, you know, we're not changing the world, but it needed to matter to me in that moment. And it needed to matter that when I was creating. So the stars have all these stories connected to them for me, which is part of what makes them so sacred, because whenever I see them, I think of all those stories. There's meaning in that symbol. That one little tiny speck of a star has so much meaning for me, and it really matters. And I think that's what's important when you're adding symbols onto things, is that there's all that connection. Again, it pulls you into your artwork, and what you're making feels so much more important. And the words that I've really gravitated to in the last year or two are things like truth. And the stars are true for me because I have so many stories that relate to them. I can feel the physical change in my body when I see them or I think about them. So I think that's sort of part of when you're trying to figure out your symbols. Maybe you see them and you like them, but you don't know why you like them. And I think once you start putting together the pieces of the puzzle, you understand how much more meaning can go into something that you already feel connected to, even though you're not sure why. But once you figure out the stories that relate to you, the personal connection, the sacred connection, suddenly it's almost like a talisman, like it's that strong, it's that powerful. And I really encourage you that if you haven't found those symbols for yourself yet, please, please, please go exploring, because they're literally transformative to your artwork. But also, for me, they've been transformative for me as a person outside of my journals as well, and you know, away from the cards. It's a full life experience. So please go looking for that. And then the other symbol is the plus sign, which I love, love, love. And the plus, I call it a cross. It's not a religious cross, but for me it's a personal cross. And it is, it's about what's holy for me, what's sacred for me. When I strip back all the everyday stuff, you know, day jobs and chores and have-tos and to-do lists, it's what's left, what's important. And those things that are holy to me, those things I'm very protective of, those things that feel sacred, that's what's condensed into that. And it tends to remind me to think of those things and to let the other things fall away sometimes. So I think they're very important as a symbol for me, and that's the sort of connection that you need to find with your sacred symbols for yourself, is the things that feel so true to you when all that other external stuff is stripped away from you. And then when it's done this way, which is more like a cross, like X marks the spot, I saw a girl online talking about her using the symbol this way, and I felt so connected to it, because I was a big fan of the Goonies when I was a kid. I've probably watched the movie like literally 500 times, not even exaggerating, and I'm the queen of exaggeration. Trust me. But I could practically recite the whole movie word for word. But the idea of you are here, it's like claiming your space, declaring yourself to the world that you're here, that you matter, that what you like, what you love matters. And I love that extra connection between the maps. I use a lot of maps in my artwork as well. Like there's a bit of map on that one. There's map on that one. So it's that connection as well. So, and that's from the Goonies, and then plus I just gravitate to that sort of thing anyway, because maps are about leaving safe harbors, finding adventure out on, if you're willing to leave the protection of the harbor and find new things, explore around, but also always coming back to home, to what's true. Even if you're out exploring, it's what brings you home to safety, what's your safe place, what feels like home, what feels like truth for you. So that's another way to look at that symbol. So I hope that's given you a few ideas on symbology in relation to mark making, as well as to simple symbols like the cross for me and the star, and then also your more complicated imagery like the deer. And I also hope you'll consider text. If you're adding text, if you don't like your handwriting, by all means, you know, cut the words out from a book. But I hope you sort of have the idea of, even with text, still finding that deeper connection and meaning to the words that you're adding to your work. So I hope that was interesting, and I'll see you again in the next video. Thanks, bye.